Welcome to this explainer on PC Guard. We're going to be diving right into the General Settings panel to help you get your application's protection configured effectively.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for this session. We're going to walk through each group of settings so you'll know exactly what they do and, more importantly, why they matter for your project. First up, let's take a look at a pretty basic but very important communication setting. By default, this is on, which is almost always what you want. It just ensures that if something goes wrong on the user's end, they actually get a notification. Super helpful for troubleshooting. Now let's move on to the really interesting stuff. We're going to explore the core settings that make sure you have maximum compatibility no matter what kind of application you're building. So, to understand this next setting, we first have to talk about what an internal overlay is. It's basically a chunk of data that a lot of development tools stick on the end of a file. The application needs it, but the OS itself doesn't manage it. And here's the crucial point. Protecting an application can sometimes move this overlay around, and that can cause major issues. The solution? It's called Advanced Overlay Management, or AOM. It's on by default, and it's pretty much the universal fix for this. It even lets you encrypt that overlay data, which is a nice little security bonus. Next up, we have Smart DLL Handling. This is a really key feature for making sure everything is stable, especially if you're protecting DLL files themselves.
And this quote from the documentation really illustrates its importance. For standalone DLLs, it's strongly recommended to keep this feature on to avoid any potential conflicts at the OS level.
Now, these two settings here give you some extra fine-tuning for those edge cases. Times where you might run into conflicts with security software or maybe have some very specific DLL requirements.
All right, let's move on to a setting that actually modifies your application's header information, all for the sake of compatibility.
So PC Guard can actually change the target OS info right in your file's header, which can be super useful. The default is set to Windows 95/NT 4.0, but as you can see, you've got options. Okay, so now we'll look at the settings that give you direct control over licensing and exactly how many instances of your application can be running at once.
This is a classic problem, especially in big corporate environments. A user moves to a new machine, their profile comes with them, but suddenly their software license is just gone.
Well, the solution is right here. You just enable this option. It makes sure the license stays put. Just be aware it's really only recommended for networks where you know for a fact that roaming profiles are being used.
So, if you're using any kind of time-based licenses, small changes to the system clock can cause errors. This setting lets you build in a tolerance for that. The default is 60 minutes, which helps prevent those false positives.
This one's pretty straightforward. You can easily control how many copies of your app can run on a single computer. This is particularly useful if you're trying to set up floating licenses on something like a terminal server.
Now, what's really interesting here is this critical note for developers. For this instance limiting feature to work right, PC Guard needs to know when your app closes. So you might need to add a manual function call to free app instance right before you quit. It's a small thing, but it's important.
Next up, we've got a couple of utility settings that are really just handy to have during your development and testing phases.
These options let you do two things. First, you can maintain your file timestamps, which is great. And second, and this is crucial, you can reset your local license. This makes it so much easier to test different protection and licensing scenarios without having to spin up a whole new machine.
So let's just do a quick recap of the most important takeaways from this whole General Settings panel.
Really, the crucial points are these. Leverage AOM and Smart DLL Handling for solid compatibility. And then carefully configure all the licensing controls so they actually match your distribution model. Oh, and definitely don't forget that note about free app instance if you're limiting instances.
And that wraps up our walkthrough of the PC Guard General Settings. Hopefully this helps you build a protected application that's not just more secure, but more reliable too. Now you just have to ask yourself, which of these settings is the most critical one for your application?